Hi, this is Beth from Around the Table Yarns. We are joined today with Celine Feyton, who is going to be talking about her ribbit socks with the kite heel. And I'm going to make you the star. There you go. Now you're the
All
star.
right. Thank you for
Welcome.
having me.
You're very welcome.
Very excited to be here and to share this pattern with you. Um, I'm really more of a garment designer, but I like knitting socks, especially in the summer. It's nice to have like a smaller project.
Hmm.
And the kite heel was because I really like the fit of a heel flapping gusset. I have
Hmm.
slightly higher arches, and so a short row heel is often very tight around the instep on my foot. But I know a lot of people don't like picking up stitches. So that's why I was trying to figure out a way to get kind of the fit of a heel flap and gusset, but mostly knitting in the round and not really having to pick up any stitches. So that's kind of how the kite heel was born.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
So I spent a good amount of time with the pattern, and I just got off of our Instagram live at 5, and so I don't have everything sitting right in front of me. Let me go grab my bag of stuff. Um, the pattern is really beautifully written. I, as
Sorry.
somebody who has now taught, hello, kitty. As somebody who has now taught sock knitting with many, many different patterns, I think the very first one that we did was a free pattern download from Ravelry when we first started our sock club, and the pattern was awful. Like
Oh,
it was just it was just the worst. And everything we did, we had to fix mistakes that were in the pattern. So when we come across a pattern like the ribbit socks, and I'm going to show you the cover of it. So here, I'll spotlight me, please. Add spotlight there. So the ribbit socks, I can even do this. No, other way. Other way, silly thing. That's going the wrong way. Oh, hello. Oh, see, I tested it and everything was working, and then I put it in an upside down. But I had to take my phone out. There we go. Hmm, that's bizarre. It's just I didn't even touch it. Okay, so the ribbit socks, can I make it closer? This is a new setup for me. Have a broken garter rib. And the kite heel is this wonderful sort of increase, a section of increases. You can see here that there's increases and then decreases, I'm guessing, to do it. But what makes this a really amazing pattern, I think, and a value for people is that you have written it with lots of math.
yeah.
So I'm going to go back to you. So you have sizes that start at 3.75 inches circumference. So that would be a little kid's size, I'm guessing,
Hmm.
a very small child's size, and then going all the way up to 10 and a quarter inches around. So can you talk a little bit about how you set this up and what your thought process was?
I have three kids, so I
One
like
sock to rule
to
them all.
exactly. And I'm, in my garment test knits, I have a wide variety of sizes as well. And whenever I've done test knits for socks, I also see that, feet vary a lot by person. And it's easy to say, oh, I'm a women's size 8, but what does that, like you could have a wide foot, you can have a narrow foot. That's really more talking about the length in my experience.
Hmm.
So I like to, in my socks, be able to knit for anybody in the family and that everybody can get a sock that fits. So I knit a lot of them. Um, this is, it's a child size one.
It's
And
so
this one
cute.
also, this one actually has fewer stitches than this one, but it's slightly larger
Mhm.
because the gauge is different. So I'd like to build that into my patterns too, because say like this one, I think it's a 40, hold on, I took notes.
Mhm.
I always forget. It's like the 48 stitch sock or something. This is a
Mhm.
56 stitch sock, but it's my size because I use DK weight yarn. So I really wanted people to be able to use a variety of yarns and to fit anybody in their family. And that was kind of the thinking behind the sizing. And that's possible by having you look at what your gauge is. And then for me, I had to do the math to make sure I had a multiple that worked for the stitch pattern. And I just had to do the math for the heel and the toes.
Well, and I was going to say, so the first iteration of your size chart happens on page 3, and that is assuming you get exactly the same gauge that you've written the pattern for, which is 8.5 stitches to the inch on a size 1 needle. But
That's right.
as you know, and as we all know,
Yeah.
not everybody gets
We
that.
don't always get the gauge, do
Not
we?
everybody gets that gauge. And so if you turn over that page and you look at page 4, you have stitches per inch starting at 5 stitches per inch and going up at half stitch intervals up to 9 stitches per inch. And then
Mhm.
with a 32 cast on, a 40 cast on, a 48 cast on, a 56 cast on, 64, 72, 80, and 88. And I have to say, after looking at so many sock patterns and working with people, that you usually get 56, 64, 72 in a sock
Mhm.
pattern, which is not user friendly if you're wanting to make kids socks.
Yeah.
And there's really no difference in the kids sock shaping
No.
for the
Yeah.
because you're just, you know, coming down and going sideways. And then to have it go up to 88 is also really lovely because if you are a really tight knitter or if you're making socks for somebody with really big feet,
Yeah.
that is an incredible breadth of sizes, and it also allows you to make a worsted weight sock pretty much. I mean, hopefully with a nice firm gauge, but socks
Yeah.
at 5 stitches to an inch, that I mean, that's a really nice. So this pattern, I think, is sort of a one-stop shop for people who are doing socks. And just I'm so delighted. It was like, oh my good, look, and then it's color coded. So
Yes.
whatever size you pick, then you print it in color and the whole thing, you can find your pattern. And you did one of the nicest things, which is you put in bold everywhere the markers go.
Yeah. I mean, it's very important to me that the knitter has a good experience. So I listen really carefully to my test knitters, and my writing style has evolved to kind of match
To
what
match
I've
that.
noticed makes it easier for someone to follow the pattern.
Well, I applause, applause, applause. It's really nicely done. Um, I spoke, so today, this morning, we met in person with 6 of the class members, and we talked about sizing and the conversation. It was interesting because I wanted people to really think about their sizing, even though most of them are experienced sock knitters. And it was
Hmm.
interesting, even though all of these women were experienced sock knitters, for the most part, they were not thinking about doing a gauge swatch for this
Mm.
project. And also had not thought about measuring their feet again.
Oh,
And because it's sort of halfway through the year, we do 4 socks a year. This is our third one for this year. We usually measure feet in January. And I thought, let's just go crazy. Let's just measure our feet again. And, I know what size my feet are, I think, but I have that memorized? Not really. So we did a whole thing of measuring our feet, and I just want to run it by you and see what you think.
Yeah.
We measure feet standing,
Yep.
standing on both feet, not just on one. And I had always learned, because your measurement is, and I'm going to show this one part of your pattern. I don't know if you have it in
Is
front of
there a
you.
way for me to share my screen? Because then I can just pull up that page.
Absolutely. I'm going to let you share your
Okay.
screen. Please
I
do.
am glad that you're touching that, Beth, because I have that question about the circumference in inches A and B. I wasn't sure that that relationship always.
Yes, so we're gonna talk about that.
Okay.
Okay. This,
You should be able to share your screen now.
okay.
And if you can't, I can pull it up.
All right. Let's see. Let me find it.
There you go. That's the one.
Oh,
That's the picture I
yeah.
wanted.
Okay.
So you have the measurement around the foot of A.
Yeah.
And where do you want the tape measure when you take that measurement?
Actually down here, but on the scheme, like usually I recommend measuring around the ball of your foot because that tends to be the widest part of your
Okay,
foot. But because there's already so much going on in the schematic, I put it up here.
got it. Okay.
That also confused me because I always do it around the ball of my.
I'm
Yeah.
delighted you said that. Because I was like, well, many, many people, and we have used Kate Atherley's book, Custom Fit Socks.
Hmm.
Um, so she did a lot of, she got a lot of people to send in their measurements and
Yeah.
has like 500 people's foot measurements. And she essentially says that where A is, and if you did another A between D and E,
Yeah,
that would
exactly.
be that's the place that we usually think about measuring is across the
Hmm.
ball of the foot, but above the bunion if you've got one of those. So not including a bunion. Um, but those measurements for many, many, many people are the same, but not for everybody. And
That's right.
also, it is hard to decide where to put your tape measure
Hmm.
above the ankle.
Yeah.
I've always done it in the narrowest part of my foot, partly because I don't go up very high with my socks. But thank you, because I was like, I recommend you measure here
That's right. Yeah.
at the
So
ball
I
of.
do I do like indicate here
Mhm.
to measure on the widest part of your foot, but I didn't want this to get super cluttered.
Yeah,
That's my bad.
that's perfectly understandable. And now that you've explained that for us and for everybody who sees this video, nobody will ever have a question again. And here's a little bit of the chart of with the actual measurement, what the sizes are. And I think this is
Yeah.
very helpful for people to see. So Aura had a question about the sock measurement A, which I'm sorry, I'm going to move your screen. Can I move your screen? I don't think I can. Sock measurement A is the first line, sock circumference in inches.
Oh,
And
let me see if I can move this.
oh,
There you
you
go.
can. There you go. So A is sock circumference in inches. And if you are of not inches inclination, you also have it in centimeters. Um,
No, what I mean is that she have like let's say 72 stitches that you cast on, and she have that person is supposed to have 8.5 inches for A and 11 for B. Is that relationship holds? That's what I meant.
that
Oh, so
relationship what?
these are the finished sock measurements, and then the relationship between these is 1.3. That's what I graded for. That said, at the end of the pattern, there is a modification section. So for example, if you have a higher instep, say you need more stitches this way, you need this to open up further, you can make this increase more stitches in the first gusset to get
To get
a higher instep,
to
and
get
then you
more
would
room.
adjust the instructions for these. Yeah. And then you'd go back down to the size.
No,
So
I have to admit, I stopped at the beginning of the pattern. I didn't keep reading.
you stopped at the beginning of the pattern and
Stop reading at the beginning.
oh,
I
you
didn't
stopped
read.
reading. Okay. So, what's really lovely about this is the ability to do alterations. So, one of the things we did, we measured where the A is on everybody, as well
Hmm.
as across the ball of the feet. And then we also made little cutouts of our feet because it's really hard to measure that CDE. So we all
Yeah.
stood on cardboard and cut out a cardboard cutout because it's a little bit easier to measure that way. And I'm trying to dig mine out. Oh, here it is. So here's mine. I will come back to being a shared spotlight. So there's mine. And what we did was we drew a line from the middle of the heel to the tallest point of the foot to measure the length of the foot. Because this is really not an easy length to get.
Yeah.
So by doing the, and we had helpers. So everybody got a helper to draw the outline of their foot so that the pen was being held as perpendicularly to the paper as possible. And
I
we
have
cut
one of
that
those
out.
too.
Huh? You have one of
I
these?
have one of those too.
We have one of these
But
for
if
all
you
my
don't
family
have
members.
that and you don't have a helper, what I would recommend is like a straight ruler. Like say you have a quilting ruler or something, you put that flat on the floor against the wall, and then you step flat-footed with your heel against the wall and against the ruler, and then you can kind of see where your foot ends. I think I find that's the best way to measure if you don't have anyone to help you.
Yeah. So it can be a little tricksy. We will always help you measure at the shop if you're able to come in. We're more than willing to measure your naked feet.
Okay.
Um, so anyway, when we did that, we had one person and she said, please ask, because she couldn't come on tonight at 6. She said, my A is much different than my leg measurement is much different than my ball of the foot measurement.
Hmm.
And we had somebody else whose B measurement was more than 1.3 times their A measurement. And so I said, well, I believe, and I will double check this with Celine, that you can do, if we're doing this top down, we're starting with the leg and the cuff, and you can cast on to fit your leg 0.9% or zero point 0.9 times your actual leg measurement. And you can knit the leg to fit and then do the heel to fit your heel circumference. And then you can increase or decrease the number of stitches on the foot to match your actual foot. Is that true or is that not true? Do you have to, can you change
Yes,
between the top and the bottom?
you can. But so here's kind of a caveat, right? So the goal is to be back in pattern when you get to the sole of the foot when
Right.
you finish your decreases. So I think you can switch between like these two if they're a different size. So if the difference is big enough to be like, oh, well, I need 64 stitches up here and I need 56 down here, yes, because then you can work an extra few sets
Got
of
it.
decreases
Got
here and still end up in pattern.
it. Okay.
If, and that's 8 stitches, right? It has to be at least 8 stitches difference. If there's only 4 stitches difference, I
It'll throw
wouldn't,
it off.
yeah, you'll get a weird patterning down here and then the toes won't really line up properly. So
Got it.
if
All
it's a
right.
completely different size, yes. Like 2 sizes, yes. If it's between sizes, I wouldn't. I would pick the
Okay.
one that fits here best.
That's good to know. So you want to take the smaller size
Yeah,
or the one that fits your foot the best.
yeah. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. And if you needed to change the pattern on, like if the, like for some people, they do have a very wide leg.
Hmm.
So you potentially could figure out some increases on the leg if you needed to, or decreases down to the heel. But
Sure.
it
You would
would
just have to be kind of careful up here where you'd have to think about how you're setting it up so that
Mhm.
when you're finished with whatever decreases you're working,
You're
that
ready
you're
to
in
go in
pattern.
pattern. Yeah. So that's not for everybody. I mean, that's not an alteration that everybody needs to make, but we did have a couple of people who were like, my instep is really big. But I love on page 10 of the pattern, I think you have an instep variation.
Yes.
And you talk about just increasing just by working a couple more repeats of the increases and then the same number of repeats of the decreases. And that will
Yes.
give you a bigger heel, which is what you need if you have a high instep.
Yeah, and it works both ways. So if your ratio is bigger, say 1.4, 1.5 instead of 1.3, you would want to add one or two repeats in gusset one, and then you're going to want to make sure that you're checking back in this modification section because it does affect the heel turn and then the second gusset as well. If you're not updating the heel turn with whatever variation you made, it's not going to be centered and it's going to throw you off.
Okay.
So make sure that if you do adjust that gusset one, that you're checking in the modifications to also adjust your heel turn and your gusset two.
Okay. Wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about how you swatch for socks?
Personally,
Mm-hmm.
I start knitting the sock. Um,
Okay.
I think when you've knit a few different kinds of socks, you kind of know, okay, well, with a light fingering weight yarn on this needle size and stockinette, I get this many stitches per inch.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in a ribbed sock, I get a different amount of stitches per inch. And then I kind of go from there. If I'm going to make a swatch, I will cast on the sock and then I'll see what my gauge is as I'm going. And if I need to, I frog back. If I don't need to, I can just adjust the needle size after finishing the cuff. Yeah. What do you recommend?
Well, I think that's a really reasonable way to do it. And that is one of the ways that we often deal with it, which is, if you're going to cast on 40 stitches to work in the round, for a swatch, you might as well cast on 64 stitches or, whatever to start the sock and then see if it fits. See if you
Yeah.
can get it over your heel, because especially if you're doing cuff down, you can try it on over the widest part of your foot. And if it fits that and it's not too loose, you're probably on track. I mean, think about the variety of stretch, or the amount of stretch that socks we buy in the store have. So I totally agree with that. And especially if you are familiar with the yarn already, you're using the same needles you always, all of that we kind of get into a rhythm with our socks. But sometimes we try new things.
Mhm.
And a ribbed pattern, and this is a broken rib, is not exactly the same as stockinette.
That's right.
So when I talked about it this morning, we did talk about doing the swatch in the round. Sorry, I have to pick up where my yarn is. And I was doing the swatch in the round with the modification, and I cannot remember whose this is right now, but the modification to see if this gives me, well, place line. Can you stop sharing just for a second?
Yes.
And then, okay. And I had a light that was working earlier, and now it's not going to work. I had a light that was hanging off of my phone, and now it's not. So let's see if I can get this into the light. Okay, this is my swatch in the round. I think I have to turn off the... filters, virtual backgrounds, camera. Oh, I've been working with a different camera, and it's not. Now it's not working at all. Okay. There. Why won't it come into focus? What I'm doing is I cast on 40 stitches. I'm working in pattern. I'm sorry that this is completely out of focus, but I'm going to just show you that I have these long trailing loops off the side. And so what I'm doing is actually working a style of in the round. So it's really basically to do swatching. And I only work on the right side of the fabric. So I'm only knitting or knitting and purling on the right side of the fabric. And when my I don't know why this is. When my yarn has been worked across, why is that not working? Oh. I'm gonna just set up the regular camera. I don't know what's going on with that thing, but it's not doing what it's supposed to. I was having trouble with this camera not focusing, but it's better than what's going on here. Nothing wants to focus anymore. So to do this, you need to take you work across in pattern, and then your working yarn is on the left side of your stitches. So I cast on and I worked a row, and then my working yarn is on the left side of my stitches. So I measure off a length that is 4 times my swatch. So my swatch is about this wide. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a little bit. And I make a loop that is a little bit more than 4 times the length of my swatch. And I take that loop and I want to knit across with it in the direction of the swatch. So I'm going to go into that stitch. I'm going to loop this one around and work it. And then you want to knit towards the left-hand side with the loop. And as you go, that loop gets smaller and smaller until you have the loop on the end. Some of them I had were really short and some of them were really long. I misjudged, but what happens is you have a swatch that you can rip back later, which is a very nice feature.
Yeah, and I like because I've swatched in the round kind of like this before, but that there's all these strands hanging around the back, and that can be kind of get in the way when you're blocking. So this is actually really nice that all the loops are kind of on the
They're
side, so
over
they
on the
don't
other
get in the
side.
way.
And then the other thing is because it's loose on this side, and you can see it a little bit here, the last 2 stitches are twisted. So I've knit into the back of those stitches, and I'm kind of adjusting as I go and pulling on those strands to keep them firm, but it gives you a really nice edge on this side. And then you could also eliminate those 2 stitches and measure your gauge without them, or add a couple of extra stitches, like do 42 and then measure across. So 40 is just my my shorthand. Like I like to do math with even numbers. I don't like to do math, so I like to do math with even numbers. So then to check that when I'm done with this, I can block it easily. So I'll just soak it in water. I will wrap it in a towel or stomp on it in a towel mostly, and let it dry flat. And I want to do that because I want to see how the yarn behaves when it's been washed, and then I'll measure the gauge at that point. And I'm sorry that I cannot seem to get any of my cameras to be in focus. And I think it's something to do with the way that Zoom is handling images now on my computer. I don't know what's going on with that. But that's how we were doing swatches. Somebody tried it and didn't like it and stopped. Didn't like all the loops on the other side and was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that." And she's just going to cast on her sock and work on it. So the thing I like about casting on your sock and working on it is if you're right, you're already there. But if you're wrong, you either have to find somebody else to give the pair to, or you have to rip it back and start over. But you said you changed your needle size.
Yeah, so I think like if you've finished the cuff, right, and then you're doing, say, like an inch
Hmm.
here, so you can kind of see how it is in pattern,
Hmm.
then you can just frog back to the cuff and change needle sizes. But also, if it's just completely like, say it's, I think when you're knitting, you can kind of see, oh, this is similar to a sock I've knit before. And it's if your first time knitting socks, make a swatch.
Make a
But if you've
swatch.
knit, yeah, if you knit socks before, I think you can kind of start with the stitch count and the yarn that you like and go from there. And if like here you're noticing, I'm getting, let's say I'm getting 8 stitches instead of 8.5. Okay, what do I need to do to adjust? Do I just frog back and use a bigger needle size or smaller needle size, whatever will work to get you the fit that you're looking for?
And that's actually, now that you mention it, a great way to adjust between the leg and the foot.
True.
So if your leg or your foot is not 8 stitches different, you could be able to do a fraction by changing your needle size up or down to get tighter or
Absolutely.
looser stitches. So if you need to make it bigger, you could just go up a needle size to make it fit
Hmm.
on the leg or the foot if one of those is bigger than the other.
Absolutely.
I've certainly talked to a knitter who said, I always do my cuffs with a 1 and my legs with a 0 and my feet with, like she had a different
Oh,
needle size for all the parts of her sock because she figured out that that was the magic sauce to make her socks work for her feet.
that's great.
Wonderful. We won't have you with us when we are doing the chart. And somebody asked me about the chart. I know there was 2 questions I wanted to ask. Um, Finding the total foot length. So like where you
Yeah.
start the heel and finding if you could talk a little bit about that, and then if you could just go over how to read the chart. And you still have the
Okay.
ability to share your screen.
Yeah, let me share my screen again to make this a little bit easier.
And then I'm absolutely going to ask you about the sweater you're wearing.
Okay, so total foot length, we're talking here the C, D, and E.
Hmm.
So the D is kind of where you have all the control.
Hmm.
Sorry, excuse me.
Sure.
Okay, nice.
We'll be right back. I muted you, so you might want to just hit your unmute. There we go.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So yes, D is where you have all the control. And then here, if you see, include how many rounds the heel turn and the gusset is going to be. Because, if you're knitting a DK weight sock,
Hmm.
you're going to get like this one, I have 18 rows and 2 inches. But this one, I have 27 rows and 2 inches. So that's why I give you the number of rounds it takes rather than a
Hmm.
measurement, because depending on your gauge, it's going to be completely different. So you can convert these rounds. using your row gauge to see how long that's going to be. And I think C, I don't think you need to worry about it too much. What matters is what C and D in total are E less than your total sock length that you're looking for, right?
Okay. So
So,
you start your heel wherever you decide, however long you want your leg to be. You're going to decide, okay, I want my leg 6 inches or 3 inches or 2 inches. And then you're
yeah.
going to do your heel and you want your
Hmm.
heel to fit your foot. So if you have a high instep, you might be adding a few rows. And then
Yeah.
when that's finished, the only thing you have to do is work until you would start E.
Yeah. You would just work the broken rib in the round until this is E shorter. And then if you go to the actual foot section of the pattern right here, it'll tell you right here how many rows the toe is. So
Oh.
you can what, and I have a little tip here on
Mhm.
actual like sock length for the foot. Um, and then you can, what I would do is as you're knitting, you can just take a ruler on like the sole and you just measure, okay, how many do I like? You say you're knitting the second size, so it's 13 rounds for the toe. Just count 13 and see how long that is. And then subtract that from the total foot length you want.
And when we did where did my little foot go? When I did my foot and I measured this length, I did the math right on my foot. So it says my foot was 9.25 inches long from here to here. And then I multiplied that and it's 8.325. So that's how long I want my sock to be. And the nice thing is you can measure what the difference is if you want to on here, but it gives you a very easy place to figure out the length of your foot. And then you can even try it on the sock, but you can also try it on your foot. You do your socks on small circulars.
I do. Um, I find it comfortable, but for toes, I like to switch to magic loop. But I
Okay.
know lots of people like to use DPNs or do magic loop the whole way around, or they use flexi flips. So you can use whatever works best for you. A lot of the toe instructions are kind of assuming two needles.
Or two sides, two
Yeah, the sole and the instep. Yeah.
the sole and the instep. Um, we do not tell people what they have to do or don't do, but I will say my experience with using two different kinds of needles is you need to do the same for both socks.
Yes.
Because my gauge on tiny needles is different than my gauge on magic loop.
Yeah, magic loop, I'm always tighter.
Mhm. And tiny needles, I'm always looser. So do take that into consideration. I did a pair of socks where I started with the tiny needles and I switched to magic loop, and so I had to do the other sock exactly the same way. So it did not save me from having to use the tiny needles. I had to still use them to make the other sock fit. Can we look at the chart of the heel and
Sure.
just talk about like how our folks will be reading that chart and because
Yeah.
somebody asked me about it today and I was like, I haven't looked at the charts yet.
Yeah.
I've
So
only looked at the sizing so far.
so if we're looking at the heel, so here's my leg, right?
Hmm.
This gusset one chart is showing you this. And so you can see here you've got this kind of garter column in the center,
Hmm.
and then you've got your increases on either side, which
So you're starting at
it's
the
all
bottom
worked
of
in
the
the
chart.
round. It's worked in the round the whole way, this one.
Right.
Gusset one and gusset two are worked in the round, and then it's just the heel turn that's worked flat. So you're starting from the bottom and you're reading from right to left and then up. And then these black lines are showing you the end of the size. So
For
size
each.
32 goes up to here, up to row 10. If you're knitting size 80, you're going to work up to row 24 up here. And the charts, you don't need to use them. If you can read your knitting, you can just follow the instructions. This is more of a visual aid if it's harder for you to stay in pattern when you're increasing or decreasing.
Okay.
And then the heel turn. So this gusset one has just one chart for every size. The heel turn is by size.
So there's one for
So
each of the different sizes.
that's right. So you
Okay.
see there's 32, 40, and it goes. And then these are worked flat. So here, row 1, we're starting on the right and
Mm-hmm.
working left. And then on the wrong side, this is where we're making the short row
Mm-hmm.
and then working this way. But so these are showing you what it looks like on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
So on the wrong side, you're actually going to be knitting these 2 purls.
And that's right there in the key,
Yep,
which it's not, if you look at the two keys, gusset one key is an in the round key. So all the knits are knits and all the purls are purls and all the left lifted and right lifted increases are exactly as written. But in
yep,
key two, it depends whether you are coming from the odd numbered rows on the right, those are your right side rows, or the even numbered rows on your left are the wrong side rows. So on those rows, that the meaning of each square changes.
exactly. Basically, on right sides, you're always going to be knitting, and on the wrong sides, you're working the ribbing. And if we're looking, on the inside of the sock, it's going to look like that.
Got it. So you don't do any kind of reinforcement in the heel because you've got that ribbing already and the garter.
So that's actually quite interesting because when I designed the vanilla version in
Mm-hmm.
stockinette, I originally wanted to put a slip stitch reinforcement in
Mm-hmm.
because I think ribbing is actually a pretty sturdy fabric already and it has a lot of stretch. And so it's great for a variety of sizes, even if you get your sizing a little bit wrong. But in stockinette, I think it's a little bit more delicate and it could use reinforcement. But the row gauge in those reinforced stitches is very different from the row gauge you get in stockinette and in ribbing. And that because, that's not an issue when you're working a heel flap because you're working that separate and then you're picking up stitches, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't really matter too much if that row gauge doesn't match. But here, because you're knitting almost the whole thing in the round, what that's causing is this to tighten up and this to kind of loosen up, and then you were getting weird folds on your instep.
Oh,
So that's why I chose not to add that in.
okay.
But I did originally want to. But trial and error, right?
Trial and error. Very cool. Any variations on the pattern you want to talk about?
Um, so I had some test knitters that skipped kind of this purl round,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that looked really cool. So I did that on these. It gives you kind of a sleeker finish.
Stop, turn off the share screen for just a second so we can see
Oh,
those closer up.
my
Thank you.
So, oh, okay. So these have this purl round here,
Hmm.
which I put in kind of match the edging here. And because I wasn't sure if this was going to look nice, this transition here, but
It
it's
does look
actually really
nice.
cute.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a nice option. And if you're interested in doing that, I have the notes for how I did that in the project page for this sock in my Ravelry. So it's all written out and you don't have to guess what you have to do because the toe setup is a little bit different.
And I will
Um,
find that and share it with the class when we get to the toe. We won't get to the toe for 2 months,
yes, you have time.
so we have a minute. Um,
Um, Other things you could, if you don't like the stitch pattern, you could work it in just regular 2x2 rib. you could work the cuff in 2x2 rib and then transition into this. I really like it in self-striping yarns because most of it's knit in the round. I think it looks really nice.
Mhm.
Um, Adding a little pop of color on the cuff or on the toe is also cute. Yeah, and I think we talked about the fit modifications already. So
The fit modifications for the instep.
the instep, and then if you have a different calf versus foot width.
Mhm. We did. Well, this has been so helpful and so informative. Thank you very much for joining us tonight and talking about this wonderful pattern that you wrote. Um, I hope that everybody enjoys doing it. We have, so the way that's, so at least one person is new to our sock club, and I just want to share that what we generally do is we start, so we've talked a lot about sizing. Hopefully you have all the information that you need to pick the size of your sock. You should measure around the widest part of your foot. So I'm going to use numbers that I'm making up, and I'm going to say that the widest part of your foot is 10 inches. So you measure around and you come, oh, 10 inches. So you measure both of your feet. We generally don't make a left and a right sock. So I always pick the smaller of my 2 feet. So if one of my feet was 10.25 and the other was 10, I'm going to pick 10 as the size to make both socks. So they both fit my smallest foot. I want it to be snugger than looser. You'll multiply that measurement by 0.9 to pick the size on page 3 or 4, depending on your gauge. So that's based on your actual measurements and taking a 10% negative ease. Then you should check your gauge to decide whether you're going to use the chart on page 3 or page 4. Because what I love about page 4 is that if you have an 8-inch measurement around your foot, or if you're shooting for an 8-inch measurement around your foot, you can do that in a yarn that gets you 5 stitches to the inch, or 6 stitches to the inch, or 7 stitches to the inch, or 8 stitches to the inch. And so you have lots and lots of choices. And I think that it's such a wonderful, versatile pattern because of that. So what uh, the class is going to do is get started with the cast on and ribbing and work to the beginning of the heel. And so the next time we meet is August 4th. And at that time, we will start the heel shaping.
Mhm.
Does anybody have any questions?
Mm-mm.
Now's a great time to ask them.
I, I had a question, but my greyhound is howling in the background, so I don't know how this is going to go. Oh, first, I'm sorry. This is not related to our project, but I need to show off to Celine. This is the beginning of my emotional support bra, is what I'm calling it. The
Oh my God.
ESB, the emotional support bralette, which is the nurture bralette, which you guys haven't seen it
Oh,
yet. It's amazing. This amazing work of architecture that Celine designed. So I just wanted to show that off.
Oh, thank
Okay,
you. I
but
love
here's my
seeing people
question.
knit my patterns.
Okay, here's my question. So I have a yarn that I salvaged. I reclaimed it from a sweater, and it's really textured. It's really kind of
Mm.
bumpy. I made hats, matching hats for me and for Pretzel, my service dog, Greyhound. You can tell I have a lot of time on my hands. I'm recovering from a long bout in the hospital. But so I thought it would be fun to knit the socks to match the hats. Um, but the yarn is so textured, I worry that I'm not going to be able to really see the ribbing, the pattern texture. Hi, sweetheart. Isn't going to really show, right? Because the yarn is textured. So I'm just thinking maybe I need to use a plainer yarn for this pattern and use this yarn with a different
I
sock
I would say you
or
have
do it in
yarn
stockinette.
and you could do a swatch and see.
Okay.
I mean,
And I could I didn't even think of it, but you had mentioned that you do a similar sock in stockinette. I could, if I needed to, I could just do this one in stockinette, right?
Mhm.
Um,
You just
and
wouldn't be doing the ribbing pattern.
right, right. And then for my next batch of actual ribbit socks, I could use a regular yarn that would highlight
The
that.
alternative would be to like, I don't know how thick that yarn is, but to hold it with like a strand of mohair or something, you'll get
Oh,
extra fluffy socks, but that might even out the texture a little bit so that
okay.
it shows up more. So that's another option. I know, sorry.
Yes.
Also, I'm also very happy to answer questions through email. So if you guys ever have like pattern support or anything, send me an email. It's in the pattern. I respond usually within a few hours. So
She
Awesome.
does.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to let you go because it looks like your hands are full. It's that time. Thank you very, very much. And we will be in
Thank
touch.
you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to stay on for just a second more. Um, any other questions about Sock Club for getting started? Is everybody pretty comfortable with picking their size and doing their swatch?
I think so, but I see if I can make a time to stop by the store and have my food. But I don't know when I can do that.
Get your foot measured?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been doing socks, but I think I need to a refresher. So
It's always good to, I actually measured a sweater recently. I'm doing sweater club in a couple of weeks, and I was, trying to pick the size for the sweater, and I measured sweaters that I've been wearing that I like the fit of, and they were 2 inches narrower than I thought I would make. And I was like, well,
Oh,
okay then. Okay, I can do that size. That seems perfectly reasonable.
okay.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. And I hope that you are doing great with your project. The number for the store is 216-230-9224. We're open every day from 10 to 6 on Tuesdays through Thursdays and 11 to 5 on Fridays through Mondays. Hello, what day is today? And so we're always happy to get questions. If you do call and leave a voicemail, we get it by email as well. So we do see them and can answer them wherever we are, even if we're not at the shop. So feel free to contact us or to send an email to info@aroundthetableyarns or to come in if you're able to come in. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody. And we'll
Good
see you
night.
soon
nice to meet you
and
guys.
in August.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.